It's the Happy Families Podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
G'day, my name's Dr. Justin Coulson. I'm here with my wife and mum to our 6 kids, Kylie, Mrs. Happy Families. Today, our Is It Just Me is all about
sleepovers. Is it just me, or are sleepovers a really bad idea?
So, we're going to dive into that, but we wanted to ask you first. Facebook blew up when we asked this question. This is a provocative topic. People have strong opinions about sleepovers for both good and bad, for fairly clear and obvious reasons, I think. This is what some of you said.
Hi, my name is Jo. I'm calling from Kingscliff. My daughter last night, who's 15, had a sleepover with a friend. I discovered that she had switched her location service off and she wouldn't pick her phone up. I came to light that she's gone to a teenage hangout in a park in Burleigh. When I called the mother of the friend that she was staying with, she gave me the impression that it wasn't her responsibility and it was my problem. I'm curious to know who is liable there and who should really be overlooking everything.
Hi, my name is Marie and I'm from Melton, Victoria. I am a mum to 2 small boys, 4 years old and 2 years old, and I'm also a teacher to high school students. I have mixed feelings because as a teacher, I teach a lot of disadvantaged students. A lot of my students have various forms of, domestic violence or divorce or poverty in their lives. So I've seen what can happen, and I know the statistics around who commits domestic violence, but at the same time, not everyone is like that, and I would hate for my fears to ruin my children's childhood.
Kylie, some great feedback there. Oh, by the way, if you want to leave us a message, you don't have to email us at podcasts@happyfamilies.com.au anymore. We have an easy-to-use button. It's a brand new plug-in on our website, happyfamilies.com.au. Just go to the website, press the button, and start talking. It's that easy, and we love hearing your voice on the podcast. Okay, let's dive into it, Kylie. The pros and cons.
Is there actually any science around sleepovers?
No. Well, there's no Australian data on sleepovers. I have combed through the databases, and it's really hard to find. In fact, it's hard to find good evidence on sleepovers. Full stop. End of story. We kind of have this belief that there's a whole lot of research on a whole lot of things, and we can just tap our fingers and, I don't know, ChatGPT or Google or whatever the latest AI is going to tell us the answer to our question. But sometimes we don't have good research. Sometimes we actually don't know.
So we're just making it up.
Well, there is some data, and that's what we're going to point to in this conversation. We don't know how many kids are having sleepovers. We don't have any idea how many parents are banning sleepovers. We do know that every time we discuss it on social media, it gets a big response. And even though there isn't much research, I've scrounged around and found a few bits and pieces. So I've come up with 3 research-backed reasons that sleepovers are awesome. And I also found 3 research-backed reasons that sleepovers are concerning. Let's dive into them. You want to start with the pros or the cons?
Well, I'm always for getting the cons out of the way. So let's start there.
So if I was to ask you, what do you think the biggest reasons people would be anti-sleepovers could be, in addition to or including what we've already heard, what would you say?
Safety issues would have to be paramount. That would be at the top of the list.
Yeah, safety concerns in the research. This is the deal breaker for a lot of people. And I get it. Sleepovers pose huge safety risks for children. There's the risk of incidents and accidents and exposure to inappropriate behavior. And we know, this is really concerning. I had a chat with one of the lead researchers on the Australian Child Maltreatment Study just a month and a bit ago on the Happy Families podcast. And he indicated that their brand new research just published shows that the group most likely to perpetrate abuse against kids is other kids. So we know that harm is most likely to be done by people who are known by and trusted by the victim of the abuse, and often it's another young person, like a big brother or just somebody else is in the house. Safety concerns are paramount.
The other things that stand out for me is the disruption of routines. Every time our children have had a sleepover.
Every time?
They have come home an absolute wreck.
How many days do you reckon it takes kids to recover from a good quality sleepover?
At least 2 or 3. By then the weekend's over and we're back into the school week and we're trying to push through the brain fog.
Through the brain frog? It's very...
Yes, I have brain fog. That's right.
Those brain frogs are really tough to get through, I'll tell you. It's true. Sleepovers are guaranteed to disrupt kids' sleep patterns, guaranteed to boost fatigue, guaranteed that more often than not, your kids are going to come home cranky and tired and ratty and miserable, impaired cognitive function. They're horrible for a few days after, as you said, Kylie. Research does tell us that irregular sleep schedules, such as those that kids are going to experience when they go and have their sleepovers, are also going to not just have those negatives, but it can impair their academic performance, and obviously it has an impact on their mood.
And lastly, I think the issues around peer exclusion and peer pressure would be another thing on the list.
So we've talked about this before, the issue of when the kids are getting together, sometimes in a big group, sometimes a small group. It doesn't really matter the size, but once it's late at night, good things don't usually happen.
I actually had a friend reach out to me recently. She's got a 13-year-old daughter who's desperate to have some friends over, and the parents would be going out for an evening and not getting back till really late. And so she just asked me what my thoughts were on whether or not it would be okay for her to leave her 13-year-old daughter behind with a few other girls, because this is her first time round. And I just said to her, look, I'm not really worried about the girls you're talking about and what they might get up to. They're really good kids. I said, but the challenge you have when you get more than one girl together is just the emotional challenges that exist and their inability to navigate those without adult supervision.
Yeah, it's the challenges of exclusion or bullying or someone saying something snide or something innocent being interpreted ambiguously, taken the wrong way. And then you've got this kid who's in the corner, kind of stuck, late at night, with no one to turn to, feeling insecure, feeling hopeless, feeling excluded. And of course, there is the risk that can blow up into something far, far worse because they're tired, they're hyped up on sugar, and all those kinds of things. So they're the concerns, and I think that they're warranted. They're important concerns. Can I just quickly dive into a couple of arguments for sleepovers? I'm actually an advocate for them in spite of the risks. If we can get sleepovers right, and if kids can be safe, I think sleepovers are fantastic, in spite of the fact that the kids can be grumpy the next day, and in spite of the fact that there can be some exclusion going on, and in spite of the fact that it's a potentially dangerous thing. I know, I'm not selling it really well, am I? But from a social development point of view, researchers at the University of Maryland showed that positive peer relationships established during childhood sleepovers can lead to greater social competence later in life. What happens is that sleepovers provide like this scaffolding. It supports social development. It gets kids into this event where they're learning how to navigate friendships and conflicts and compromise outside of the typically structured environment of school or home. And I don't know that it's healthy or safe to protect our kids from that stuff all the time. It's good that they end up in those situations so long as they have the opportunity to navigate them with appropriate support, and so long as the environment supports cooperation and conflict resolution and empathy. So for me, I think that the social potential and the fact that the kids, some of my best memories are from sleepovers. We didn't have sleepovers when I was a kid until I was into my teen years. That was just the way it worked in my family. But Kylie, I remember my friends would stay over. One night we went into the pantry. So mum and dad had a walk-in pantry in this particular house. Went into the pantry. There was 2 liters of chocolate syrup. And one of my friends, Aaron, said, "What will you give me if I drink it?"
You are not doing yourself any favours right now.
We all said we'd give him $5. Back in those days, that was a lot for us kids. We said we'd give him $5 if he would drink the 2 litres of chocolate syrup.
It's disgusting.
He got through about a litre of it.
That's disgusting.
But when he burped, the whole room just smelled like chocolate. I remember those things. I remember skinny dipping because we all just thought it was so funny, or doing a nudie run down the street.
Okay, so all the parents... all of us are all screaming, no, don't say anything else.
Yeah, of course. But the thing is, everyone did it as well, right? And everyone remembers the sleepovers because they did those dumb things.
So there's a couple of things that jump out at me.
Right.
I'm not against sleepovers at all. But with all of the experience that we've had over the years, I probably am against group sleepovers.
Right.
Large groups have never worked out well They just never have worked out well. I think having a really close friend come over and spend the night, or you go and spend the night with them, I think there's lots of merit to that.
What about camping out in the backyard, though? We used to have just 2 or 3 of my mates. We'd set up a tent in the backyard and we'd camp overnight in the backyard. We thought it was so awesome. We'd go down to the shops and buy a couple of packets of Hubba Bubba and we would chew gum in the tent all night. And it was just great.
Well, you didn't let me finish because the next thing was you acknowledged that you didn't actually start having sleepovers well into your teens.
Right.
And that makes a huge difference. I remember one of our kids getting a sleepover invite as a 6-year-old.
Yeah.
With a group of 6-year-olds. And they're not ready for that. If you want to start to stretch your kids in a social way, send them to grandma's at 6. Send them to grandma's at 8. But
well, see, this is important as well. Sleepovers with friends versus sleepovers with family. That's an important distinction.
It's a very different. I literally remember having a sleepover at my auntie's house when I would have been, I want to say 5 or 6. I was really young, and I have a vivid picture in my mind of being in my boy cousin's bedroom. So he'd obviously gone, I wasn't sleeping in the room with me. I had his room. He had trucks on the walls and I could just see these trucks. And I was so scared. I wanted my own familiar space, but there was nowhere to go. There was nowhere to, there wasn't any way to deal with it. I had to be there.
So there's another con. There's the anxiety of sleepovers for little kids. Yeah.
So age matters and context matters.
All right. I want to come to those in a sec. Let's just do a quick summary of where we are. First of all, the arguments against sleepovers. Number 1, there's the safety concerns. Number 2, there's the disruption to routine. Number 3, there's the stuff that goes on in the peer group that's not positive. And we could add screens as well. Like that really changes the dynamic again if screens are involved. The positives, the arguments for sleepovers, there's the social development, there's the memories and the bonding that I've clearly made a big deal about.
But you don't need to have a sleepover to make memories.
No, you don't. But research shows that sleepovers can enhance the emotional bond between kids and contribute to their overall well-being and happiness. I'm
I don't
literally
know if I want my
citing
kids
from
doing nudie
child
runs.
development. Yeah, but when
Or
they're
drinking 1 litre of chocolate syrup.
And it also helps them to build independence and make decisions for themselves. That's the summary so far. Now, there are 5 things that I think we need to bear in mind, and time is almost up already. So over the next 70 to 90 seconds, we are going to whiz through 5 things that we should keep in mind when we're talking about sleepovers. Kylie, you've already touched on the first one. The age matters. Age matters because when you're older, you're less likely to experience harm and abuse. Research shows that younger kids are at greater risk. They're simply more vulnerable. The older you are, the less vulnerable you are. Not that you're invulnerable, but you're less vulnerable as you get older. And when you're older, you're also much more aware. You get that spidey sense, that tinkle, that feeling. You know what's a risky situation and what's not, or at least you do much more than when you're 5 or 8 or 11.
I think the kind of personality your child has matters as well.
So I would call this assertiveness.
Have you got a child who's willing to speak up and speak out when they're uncomfortable? Will they get in touch with an adult, whether it's ring you as mum or dad, or go to the responsible adult in the house?
Or have they got the guts to just look at their friends and say, stop it, this is not okay? Like, can they call out bullying? Can they look at someone and say, what made you think that was right? Like having that moral courage, that's what I call it, the assertiveness, big deal. So number 1, how old are they and how aware are they of what's going on? Number 2, how assertive are they? Number 3, communication.
It's so important. Do your kids know that no matter what, they can call you?
Yeah.
That they can reach out to you if things are not going well?
Which also prompts the question, are you going to give them a phone? If they're too young to normally have a phone, do they go with a phone? Or if they don't have a phone, how do they contact you? What if the person who's supposed to be the trusted adult in the situation is actually unsafe? They can't really say, I need a phone to call my mum because you're scaring me. So it's a really, really, really tricky one. Some kids are going to be so easily swayed by their peers if things go sideways. Are they able to communicate with you and the people around them?
How well do they know the people that you're leaving them with as well? I think that's a really important one.
Okay, so let's call that number 4. Let's just talk about supervision. How many kids are going to be there? Who else is going to be there? I remember you telling me a horror story about a sleepover shortly after we were married where somebody that you knew was inappropriately touched by an uncle who was visiting from overseas. So the kids were having the sleepover and everyone in the house was safe, except, oh, hang on, we've got somebody new visiting from overseas, but they're a trusted adult, right? Because they're family. It turns out they weren't. Horrifying story, absolutely horrifying. So as an adult, you want to know who's there. And the last thing that I'm going to bring up is you want to know who is going to be responsible. We've had conversations with other adults who are going to be looking after our kids at sleepovers, and we've said, is there anyone going to be drinking? And that matters purely because one time my parents had gone overseas on a holiday, and my grandma and grandpa were looking after us kids, and Nan and Pop had a couple of drinks one night. They weren't drunk or anything, but they had a few drinks, and they certainly were not safe to drive. And I was playing a little bit rough with my sisters and broke one of my sister's arms. I know. So this isn't even a sleepover situation, but it just prompts the question, if something were to go wrong, are there responsible adults who are able to get in the car and get the kids to the hospital or do something to protect them? Again, unlikely, but not trivial. Not trivial. This stuff matters.
So our key points from today's conversation, there are definitely a couple of things that go against having sleepovers.
And they're big things.
We've got some real concerns around safety for our children. There's the disruption to routine and just dealing with the terror child for the next 24 or 48 hours afterwards. And the challenges around peer pressure and exclusion. They're real. And the arguments for it, let's face it, they're downright fun.
They're downright fun.
They're downright fun. There's so much to do, so much fun to have, memories to make, bonding to create.
Yeah.
They're fun.
Okay, so here's what I would say. If you're looking for the upshot of all of this, the take-home message, with kids under 12, stick with a sleep under, also known as a late over. Fancy way of saying, I'll pick you up late and bring you home. You're not staying over. So I really like that idea. I reckon it works. With bigger kids, I reckon you just role play, practice. What will you say if things aren't going right? Make sure that they know that they can be assertive in the power of doing that. Next, make sure they can contact you. Make sure you know that they're never to enter the room of an adult or someone of the opposite gender. I think that's super, super important. It just keeps them safe. And know what's going on with alcohol and supervision and access to screens. If you do that sort of stuff, pre-armed is prepared. Sleepovers are amazing when they go well. And more often than not, most of the time, they do go well. But keeping our kids safe is a priority. So hopefully this helps. The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rawlin from Bridge Media. And if you'd like more info about making your family happier, or to read a written version of this podcast, not a transcript, just a written version of the podcast, check it all out, happyfamilies.com.au.